What if one act of kindness could change everything? This is the story of Eleanor, a poor widow and a starving boy, two souls whose lives would intertwine in ways no one could have ever imagined. Eleanor sat on a wooden bench outside a dusty market in a small town. The scorching sun cast long shadows on the cracked pavement. Her hands trembled as she counted the last few coins she had left. 3 silver coins. That was all. For a widow like Eleanor, life had become a cruel test. Since her husband's tragic passing 5 years ago, she had battled through every storm to raise her only son, David. But fate had been unkind. She lost her job, and sickness drained what little savings she had. Now, she could barely afford food for herself, let alone pay for David's school fees. But then, fate played its mysterious hand. As she sat lost in thought, a small ragged figure stumbled into the market, scavenging for scraps. A boy, no older than 10, dressed in torn clothes. His face streaked with dirt, eyes filled with hunger and pain. Eleanor's heart clenched. She watched as the boy reached for a discarded piece of bread from the ground, only for a shopkeeper to slap his tiny hands away. "Get lost, you street rat!" the man barked. The boy flinched, but said nothing. He simply turned away, his hollow eyes filled with silent suffering. Eleanor knew that pain too well. She looked at the 3 coins in her palm, her only means of survival. A cruel battle raged in her mind. Feed herself or feed the boy? Her stomach twisted in hunger. Her mind screamed at her to think of David. But her heart whispered a different truth. Without a second thought, Eleanor rose from the bench and walked up to the boy. She knelt beside him, took his trembling hands, and placed the 3 silver coins in his tiny palm. "Go, my child, buy some food," she said softly. The boy's eyes widened in disbelief. He stared at the coins, then back at Eleanor. "See, thank you," his voice cracked. That moment, neither of them knew this single act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. Eleanor watched as the little boy clutched the coins tightly in his small hands, his lips trembling as if he wanted to say something more. But instead, he simply bowed his head, turned, and hurried toward a nearby food stall. She sighed, feeling a strange sense of peace wash over her. It wasn't the first time she had sacrificed for another, but it felt different this time. As she walked back home, her empty stomach twisted in protest. The decision to give away her last coins meant one thing. She had nothing left. No food, no money, not even enough to send David back to school. But the boy's eyes had haunted her. She couldn't bear to see a child suffer, even if it meant her own struggles would grow heavier. By the time she reached her small, rundown home, David was already waiting for her. He sat on their old wooden doorstep, his school uniform neatly folded beside him, his bare feet dusty from the long walk home. "Did you get the money for school, Mama?" he asked hopefully. Eleanor's throat tightened. She knelt beside him, brushing his hair back gently. "Not today, my love," she whispered. David looked down, disappointed, flickering in his eyes. But he didn't complain. He never did. That night, as they lay on the thin mat that served as their bed, Hunger gnawed at them both. Eleanor tried to sleep, but guilt weighed heavy on her chest. Had she made the right choice? Would fate be kind to her in return? She could only hope. The next morning, Eleanor woke up to a soft knock at the door. It was unusual. No one ever visited her this early. When she opened the door, her heart nearly stopped. There, standing in the same torn clothes, but with a shy smile, was the little boy from the market. He was holding a small brown bag in his hands. "Good morning, Mom," he said softly. Eleanor blinked in surprise. "What are you doing here, child?" The boy hesitated before extending the bag toward her. I wanted to share my food with you. You gave me your last coins, and I don't know how else to say thank you." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. She took the bag with trembling hands, opening it to find warm bread and a small bottle of milk. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered. The boy looked down at his feet. "I know, but I wanted to." Eleanor knelt down, looking into his tired but kind eyes. "What's your name, child?" "Daniel," he replied. "Where's your family, Daniel?" His body stiffened. A shadow crossed his face. "I don't have one anymore." Eleanor's heart ached for him. She reached out, gently squeezing his small hands. "From now on, you have me," she said softly. Daniel looked up, his eyes wide with emotion. At that moment, a silent promise was made. Neither of them knew it then, but their fate had been bound together. Years later, that promise would turn in a way that no one could have ever imagined. Time passed and life did not get easier. Eleanor took Daniel in as her own, sharing what little she had. It was never enough, but they survived. David, though initially hesitant, grew to love Daniel like a brother, but money remained scarce. Eleanor worked tirelessly, washing clothes, scrubbing floors, taking any odd job she could find. Still, there were nights when all they had was a cup of water and faith. Yet, despite everything, Eleanor never regretted her decision. She saw something in David, a hunger not just for food, but for something greater. He was determined, hardworking, and sharp. Whenever he wasn't helping Eleanor with chores, he would sit beside David and listen as he studied his school books. Though Daniel couldn't afford to attend school himself, he memorized every lesson David read aloud. And then, one day, fate tested them once more. Eleanor fell ill, her frail body exhausted from years of hardship, finally gave in. Fever consumed her, leaving her bedridden, unable to work. With no money for medicine, David and Daniel took turns caring for her. But as days turned into weeks, her condition worsened. "Daniel," she whispered weakly one night. "Yes, Mama," he answered, holding her frail hand. "If anything happens to me, promise me you will take care of David." Tears welled in her eyes and David's eyes. "Don't say that. You are going to be okay." Eleanor tried to smile, but her strength was fading. "You are my son, Daniel. Never forget that," she murmured before drifting into unconsciousness. Daniel clenched his fist. He had to do something. He couldn't let her die. So that night, he made a decision. He would leave. He would find a way to make money, no matter what it took. And he would return, no matter how long it took. Before dawn, Daniel packed his few belongings and set off toward the city. He had no plan, no direction, only one goal: to save the woman who had saved him. The city was cruel. He worked as a cleaner, a porter, even as a street vendor, anything to earn money. Every night, exhaustion weighed him down, but the thought of Eleanor's weak body kept him moving. Months turned into years. Through sheer determination, Daniel found himself working for a small business. He started as a cleaner but quickly caught the attention of the owner with his intelligence and dedication. He learned everything: business, finance, negotiation. And then, one day, an opportunity came that would change everything. A wealthy investor took a liking to him and offered him a position in his company. Daniel seized it. Years passed, and with unwavering determination, he climbed the ladder, eventually becoming one of the most successful businessmen in the country. But despite all the wealth he had amassed, one thing remained in his heart. He had made a promise. It was time to go home. Dressed in an expensive suit, stepping out of a luxury car, Daniel walked through the same street where he had once begged for food. His heart pounded as he approached the tiny home where his life had changed forever. Would she still be there? Would she even recognize him? As he knocked on the door, his hands trembled. The door creaked open, and there stood Eleanor, now older, frail, and still struggling. She gasped. Tears welled in her eyes. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice shaking. He dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "I came back for you, Mama." At that moment, Eleanor wept, not out of sadness, but out of overwhelming joy. Her sacrifice has not been in vain, and had not been in vain. Daniel had returned, not as the starving street boy she once saved, but as a man who would now change her life forever. As Eleanor stood in the doorway, her frail hands trembling, she could hardly believe her eyes. The little boy she had once given her last coins to was now a successful man, standing before her like a guardian angel sent by fate. Tears streamed down her face as Daniel held her hands. His grip firm but gentle, his eyes filled with emotions words could not express. "You never gave up on me, Mama," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And because of you, I found my way. Now I want to give you the life you always deserved." Eleanor could only nod, overwhelmed with gratitude. From that moment on, everything changed. Daniel moved her and David into a beautiful home, one where hunger and suffering were no longer guests. He ensured David went back to school and had every opportunity to chase his dreams. But Daniel did not stop there. He remembered the street where he had once begged for food. He remembered the other children, just like him, who had no one to care for them. So he built a foundation in Eleanor's name, the Eleanor Hope Foundation, to support widows, educate street children, and provide food for the poor. His story spread across the country, inspiring millions. Reporters asked him, "Why do you give so much?" And his answer was always the same: "Because one woman showed me that kindness can change everything." Years passed, and Eleanor, now old but deeply fulfilled, sat in the garden of their home, watching as children played in the orphanage Daniel had built. She turned to him and smiled. "You have given me more than I ever dreamed. "My son." Daniel held her hand gently. "No, Mama, you gave me everything first." That day, Eleanor closed her eyes with peace in her heart. She had lived a life of sacrifice, but in the end, she had won. Not with riches, not with power, but with love. Daniel continued her legacy, ensuring that every struggling widow, every hungry child, and every lost soul would always find a place of hope. His story became a lesson, a blueprint for everyone who believed that small acts of kindness had no power. Because they did, they could change the world. Moral of the story: a single act of kindness can ripple through generations. The seeds we plant today will become the trees that give shade to the world tomorrow. If you ever wonder whether doing good is worth it, remember this story. One sacrifice, one selfless act, one moment of kindness can change a life forever. Life has a way of repairing kindness in ways we least expect. Eleanor gave everything she had, expecting nothing in return. But what she received was greater than what. She built a legacy of love, one that transformed not just Daniel's life, but generations to come. Maybe today you are struggling. Maybe you feel like your kindness goes unnoticed. But remember, kindness is like a seed. It may take time, but one day it will grow into something greater than you ever imagined. So, the next time you have the chance to help someone, do it, not for recognition, not for reward, but because every act of kindness creates ripples in the universe, and one day those ripples will return to you in ways you never dreamed possible. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. And always remember, no act of kindness is ever wasted. Thank you.